visuals were great, awesome. They were captivating, sucked me in right away. I didn't leave my seat, I didn't want to leave my seat. Welcome to Left Turn Tread Hooks, episode number 24, which is a very good number for I am taking this episode. The number 24 is iconic for Jeff Gordon, as well as current NASCAR driver William Byron. So episode number 24 of this podcast, I'm your host, Dan Lindsay. And I bring up the number, I bring up those names because I am doing a movie review for the first time on this channel. A movie review of the F1 movie that came out a couple of weeks ago. And I just have to say, I was thrilled about this movie after I saw it. But when I first heard about this, I was a little skeptical of the movie. Then the first trailer dropped. No dialogue, just hearing the cars, feeling the cars, seeing the racing action around each track for this movie, and I was hooked as soon as I saw the trailer. I couldn't wait for it. It's finally here. It just came out a few weeks ago. It is a wonderful movie. I'm glad I saw it, and I'm just going to kind of dig into the movie a little bit here. Kind of compare it to NASCAR because I grew up a NASCAR fan, so there's some things that I've definitely noticed about F1 that I don't see in NASCAR, and it makes sense even more now why there are fans of NASCAR that don't like F1, and vice versa, especially where there's fans of F1 that don't like NASCAR. So I understand it a little bit more, but now my interest is peeked into F1 a little bit, but again, NASCAR is what I know, but I do feel like pursuing the sport of F1 a little bit more. I understand the international appeal of it, the road coursing, the street racing of appeal of F1. You don't get that in NASCAR very often. We just did recently with this Chicago street race for NASCAR, but it's one street race and there's only like 4 other road courses on the schedule, and there's one that's kind of a made-up road course within a speedway, so I don't know if that really counts. But this movie really changed my perspective on F1. I still have yet to watch an F1 race since I've watched this movie, but I do plan on trying to dive into F1 a little bit more. I know the names Max Verstappen. He is arguably one of the best drivers in the world. I think NASCAR would like to boast that Kyle Larson is one of the best drivers in the world as well. Maybe one day we'll get to see that, but I get the appeal of F1 a little bit more, and I want to take this time just to dive into this movie a little bit more. On the artistic side first, I just want to say right off the bat that the visuals were great throughout the movie. The visuals were awesome. They were captivating, sucked me in right away. I didn't leave my seat. I didn't want to leave my seat. The racing visuals were just so well done. I wouldn't have minded a little more racing actually within the movie, but it's not a complaint. I thought they balanced the drama, they balanced the meetings with the races all very well within the movie. Some groundbreaking stuff was done to film this movie, including just some regular camera mounts on these cars. You know, the production crew, Jerry Bruckheimer and such, they were involved in Top Gun Maverick. Just watching a video recently where it's like, hey, we didn't have to worry about weight or what do we attach to an F1 because it didn't affect the F1, but just even the tiniest bit of weight would affect these F1 cars. And in reality, these are F2 cars that were made to look like F1 cars just because F1 cars are so ridiculous expensive. F2s were a lot cheaper to rent and to use for this movie. So I thought that was really cool too, that they wanted to make it as authentic as possible. Even though they had to use F2 cars, they're still able to make it look like the real F1 cars. Shooting the track, shooting the passing, shooting different things, shooting the POV view of the cars, and just kind of seeing the real-time POV with how they built the mounts. Like, that was all done real time. Just really appreciated all the effort that was done by Bruckheimer and his team to really give us an authentic feel on that side. Brad Pitt, Damson Idris, they were actually in those cars, racing those cars where we saw the footage. It wasn't just a motorized thing that they shot to make it look like it was there. They were actually racing them. They were trained. There's a lot of trials and stuff that they went through to get, and they just loved it. And I loved how Bruckheimer and his team, director and his team, they were like, let's get an F1 driver and then get our cast. It would be one thing to say, let's do this movie, let's get XYZ actors, let's get a pretty face, let's get an older guy like Pitt, a younger guy like Damson, and let's just, and then figure out the rest. No, they went the other way of, we're going to go get one of the best drivers in the world in Lewis Hamilton, lean on him, get his experience, get his expertise, make sure we're being real, make sure we're being authentic, and then they got their cast. And Brad Pitt and Damson Idris just benefited very well. Brad Pitt's character was Sonny Hayes. Damson Idris's character was Joshua Pierce. So you'll probably hear me say Sonny a lot. You'll probably hear me say Pierce a lot. And I'm referring to Brad and Damson Idris while I'm talking about those guys. But I'll still probably use them interchangeably here. My point is just to say that they both did well with the training, how they handled the cars, their acting. Just felt really grounded with those two guys. I just think it's spectacular that they trained to do that. I really hope that the hardcore F1 fans enjoyed what they portrayed. I hope that they can appreciate what they did and really say, wow, I felt like I was watching actual racers, not just actors pretending. Obviously, a little bit, with some stuff, but hopefully it felt authentic to not only to just your normal viewers like me that's not very familiar with F1, but to these big fans of F1 as well. And I felt the plot was simple, but the plot being simple is not a bad thing. I felt the score was done really well. Music and scores are very crucial to any movie. Hans Zimmer did a great job. He introduced Sonny right away with some great music right off the bat. We really got a feel of what that character was going to be at the beginning of the movie, and we knew it was probably going to change throughout the movie, but we got a good feel of what they wanted us to think about Sonny right away. So it was really well done. Again, the score was really good. And I go back to the plot. Yes, it was simple, but sometimes you need simple. F1 is complicated. The commentators that they had in for these races were very good in how they explained different things about points, about podiums, about teamwork, different things like that. So if you're going to have a lot of explanation of different things about the sport, you kind of need to keep the plot simple. And again, simple isn't bad. Simple doesn't get in the way of other things that you need the movie to do. And I really thought the character development of both Sonny and Pierce were excellent. From on Sonny's side, we got to see that arrogant vet turn kind of mentor, kind of team player in the middle, but definitely developed into that mentor and team player as it went on. And from the opposite perspective of Joshua Pierce, he was like, I'm a rookie, but I'm really good. I'm the next big thing. I don't need mentorship. I don't need this. I don't need that. I'm going to go do all this stuff in the public eye. And he changed his tune by just observing Sonny Hayes, by observing Brad Pitt's character, and just seeing, wow, this guy actually kind of maybe knows what he's doing. He's doing it well, and he's not doing all these flashy things that I'm doing. Well, what's the secret? So I thought not only was the plot well, but it was shot well with that character development, because we got to see how those characters developed without a lot of exposition, without a lot of dialogue. A couple shouting matches between the two at two different points in the movie. That was really it. We got observations of both of them kind of watching the other from a distance. So they told the story of the development of these characters very well visually, and I really appreciated that. A lot of great visuals from the cars, but a lot of great visuals from just the storytelling of the character arc as well here. And the motivations were understood without having to have exposition, or the motivations were understood without having to have a lot of dialogue between the characters. We could see it visually. So we knew the motivations. We knew where both these characters were going, where they would have to be on the same page more, and I thought it was developed well. Again, it was simple, but simple was really good in this aspect. I feel this movie would suck you into the world of F1 no matter what your level of fandom is for the sport. It truly did that for me. One thing I noticed that F1 doesn't always seem to favor the underdog teams, because if you have the money, you're going to spend it for the best and the biggest items, so to speak. So, the sport doesn't always seem to favor underdog teams. So that was really cool on this story here, that Apex was able to be this underdog team. They knew they might not have the best cars, but they knew they could probably out strategize some of these teams. And obviously, in the movie world, we saw that get better and better as we saw each race develop. We had a bad accident for Joshua Pierce's character within the movie that kind of really altered the team dynamic and really made it difficult when he came back in the fold, but also I think made it easier. I think that was a kind of a wake up call for Pierce's character of like, what do I got to do to be better here? Oh man, if I wouldn't have wrecked, I would have, won a race because of what my teammate was telling me. And that's when it truly clicked for Pierce's character of this guy does know what he's talking about. So another, again, big character development moment within the movie that was just great. Again, didn't need a lot of exposition. We just saw it happen. We just saw what we really able to get inside of the mind of both racers, especially Pierce, of like, I need to change how I do things. So I thought that was really well done. I am not expecting any kind of like big Oscar nominations for this movie. It wasn't the best picture of the year or anything like that. I don't think we're going to get any best actor or actresses nominations for anybody. But the cast was great. The cast was really a sum of its parts than just Brad Pitt or Javier Bardem. Showcasing their roles. They were there. They were present. They had big roles, but it wasn't at the expense of the rest of the cast. And I thought that was great too, that you really had this really good ensemble that really showed the picture of an F1 team, of the cast of the team, and the movie was about team and teamwork as well. So I thought that was really well done within the cast. Now, as much as I love the movie, I have to compare the sport of F1 to NASCAR. And I got to learn about F1 through this movie. Again, NASCAR is what I know. F1 is still kind of fresh as a sport for me, but I'm wanting to learn, wanting to get into that more. I get why NASCAR fans and drivers want to have some things that they do in F1. Tire wear is a very big thing to both sports. So seeing those strategic meetings on how they use different compounds at different points in the races, and it might be different compounds for different drivers at different points in the races, was just really fascinating to me. And I feel like, in the real world, like NASCAR is kind of going that way, but they've been having such varying degrees of success with different tire compounds that NASCAR isn't quite there. But I'm hoping that at some point NASCAR is either like, hey, we have a new compound, or hey, let's do what F1 does and say you have these 2 or these 3 tire types for this particular race. Use as you want. You only have so many sets, and it just leaves it up to those drivers and crew chiefs to really make different calls. Those strategic meetings, like we saw in the movie, do happen in real life on both sports. And having, if NASCAR is like, every race you're gonna have at least 2, maybe 3 compounds, use as you may. I think NASCAR, seeing NASCAR maybe trend that way could be a very, very interesting thing for the sport and very key for the sport maybe in its growth. But so I very much speculating there, but I thought it was very interesting to really see in that world of just that tire management. It was very fascinating to me from F1 pit stops. I have to say, I had in my mind about F1 pit stops that's like, yay, they can do it in 3 seconds. Well, of course they can. They have 500 members on that pit crew. No wonder they can do it in 3 seconds. But just in the movie, and again, I need to watch an F1 race just to experience it in more real time. But just in the movie, man, pit stop in F1 is actually a form of art. It really is. Kudos to those guys, because I mean, a lot of people doing different things and to still actually get it in under 3 seconds, that is actually very impressive. It's a work of art. I do like to argue that NASCAR can do very impressive things with a half or even third of the crew that an F1 pit crew does, and they can do it in 8 or 10, maybe 11 seconds. But I shouldn't take away from an F1 pit stop just because it's amazing to watch when you actually can watch it. And that's just one of the big things I'm looking forward to when I actually tune on an F1 race here soon. But an interesting difference is how pit stops are done there. And I feel like NASCAR is like, we want to figure out how to make these quicker because it's like pit stops are quick in other motorsports that are competitors to us. So what can we do as a sport to make that quick and fascinating to fans as well? F1 has their version of pit stops, NASCAR has their version of pit stops, and I think both are really deserving of a lot of credit to the way they do different things. They're very different, but still both works of art in what they do. The other big difference that I noticed was just the emphasis on not just wins within F1, but how much of a podium is a celebration. Like you're not just celebrating the race winner, you're celebrating the top three guys by showcasing this podium throughout the movie in every single race. I think the podium thing is fascinating in F1. In NASCAR, I'd say you either win or you go home. You don't have, if you finish second, well, you're just the first loser, right? So it's a little bit of a different mentality, it seems like, in F1. So I think it's very interesting to see how much they still, evaluate wins and have a high importance on wins when it comes to the points they award, but it's like, hey, we're going to showcase the top three, kind of like the Olympics does. We're not going to show the gold medalists, we're going to show the podium, because it's challenging enough to win, but it's still challenging to get on the podium in a race like this. So we're going to celebrate that too. I think that's really cool. Huge difference between NASCAR and F1. And the points, again, big difference there. Whereas NASCAR's a little bit less of a gap between first, second, and third, and really through the whole field. F1, it's a 7-point difference from first place to second place, and it's a 3-point difference from second place to third place. After third, it's just a 1-point decrease in points for the rest of the top 10. That's also fascinating. If you finish in the top 10, you get at least a few points for being in the top 10. If you finish 11th or worst, 0 points. In NASCAR, if you finish 35th, you still get like 3, maybe even 5 points, depending on how big the field was that day. So, NASCAR doesn't say, oh, you didn't finish in the top half of the fields that was at that racetrack, so you don't get any points. So like, we'll still give you some points. F1 is like, you didn't make it to our top 10, man, you're not really good at all, so you don't get any points. I think that's really cool, really fascinating. Just a lot of things that are kind of in my head is like, if I could fix NASCAR, maybe I would borrow some of these ideas too from NASCAR, just because I feel like you could really amp up the competition within NASCAR by kind of modeling what F1 does. F1, they field 20 cars per race, no more and probably no less. There's 10 teams, 2 drivers per team. I think that's interesting, where NASCAR fields, they have anywhere from 36, because there's 36 charter teams, 36 cars to 41, depending on what the track is and other factors there. So NASCAR fields vary, but there are always at least 36 drivers, so almost twice as many as a field of F1 drivers. But that makes sense, because NASCAR does mostly ovals, where you can't really put 40 cars on a lot of these road courses and street courses that the F1 and open wheel do a lot of their races on. So, and the last thing I really noticed as a difference was teams on the track seem to work together more within F1 than NASCAR. Now, Apex might have been a little more of an extreme example of teams working together. That's one of the things I'm sure I will find out as I get to know and watch F1 more. But in the movie, at least Apex worked together more, and maybe some questionable strategies by Sonny Hayes, but it was strategy nonetheless that really helped Joshua Pierce's character finally get into the top 10, finally get to the podium, finally get a win. It was very impressive what they did there as a team within the movie. But I got to imagine, again, the realism, the mirroring of the sport of F1 was probably pretty close in that aspect as well. Overall, F1 was a great ride from start to finish. It really was. I'm sure there's stuff I missed. I'm sure there's omissions that would have been nice to have in the movie. I'm sure your hardcore F1 fans are probably going to criticize a certain number of things. I'm not that person. Again, I was sucked in from the very beginning. I was glued to the screen in the theater the entire time. Really enjoyed the movie start to finish. As a sports fan, as a motorsports fan, I felt as everything it needed to be, especially if part of the goal was to really increase the foundation of fandom for F1. With this movie, though, I can't help but wonder and really wish for either a sequel or even a reboot of the NASCAR movie Days of Thunder. Days of Thunder came out in 1990. recently rewatched this movie after having not watched it for a long time. And after watching that movie, seeing F1 movie, I really, really hope for either a sequel to Days of Thunder or let's even just reboot the whole thing. Honestly, I think there's a lot of things that were in that 1990 version of Days of Thunder that really don't really work on and especially off the track in present day society and NASCAR. But let's get to where I feel like you could connect this universe of F1 to the universe of Days of Thunder. Both movies had a down on his luck driver just looking for his next big moment. Both movies had a major plot-altering accident. And both movies have Jerry Bruckheimer listed as a producer. And I think one of the cooler through lines of both movies here, that you can make this a movie universe in a sense, both scores were done by Hans Zimmer. So I feel like all those could add up to a fun sequel that could connect Days of Thunder and F1. From a production side, I mean, Bruckheimer has even more knowledge of what to do with racing and cars and cameras that he can do, that he did with F1, that he couldn't do, obviously, because of technology with Days of Thunder, that he could do now. So that's why I almost feel like a reboot would be really cool, but I think a sequel could work here also. And I've got some ways you could connect the plots of both movies to get a sequel to, honestly, both Days of Thunder and F1. Let's connect these two films and make this kind of a motorsports universe, right? Tom Cruise, 63. Brad Pitt, 61. So it would be easy to picture both of them pre-Days of Thunder as contemporaries, as guys that race against each other in open wheel. Cole Trickle, that was Tom Cruise's character in Days of Thunder. He states he was an open wheel racer before he took the NASCAR ride. And the NASCAR ride was kind of like, well, I got nowhere else to go, might as well go to NASCAR. So I think you could really have a picture of a big flashback of Brad Pitt, Tom Cruise racing against each other in open wheel pre-Days of Thunder, and being like, oh, that's how these two are connected. And then we take the movie to follow them on their journeys to where, we know how Cole went through NASCAR and got better with NASCAR despite his scary accident. And we already know kind of Brad Pitt's backstory, his character story of Sonny Hayes. So, they both be an open wheel, and then they kind of diverge in their routes, and we bring them back together in present day. Not necessarily NASCAR, but, it could be a couple different forms of things. But again, you could really, if you connect them with an open wheel, you could go a couple of different ways of explaining how Tom Cruise lost his open wheel ride. You could just say the team folded and these two were teammates and they both had to go their separate ways. Or I feel you could even make Brad Pitt a villain here and say he was a domino in the chain of why the team shuttered its doors, Tom Cruise's former open wheel team, or he was a big catalyst even of getting Tom Cruise to lose his ride, that team to shutter its doors. Tom Cruise kind of lets a couple apples hang there in Days of Thunder movie, later in the movie, to where he's like, yeah, this is why I lost my ride. And I feel like if you could essentially place Brad Pitt in that role and say Brad Pitt was a big catalyst on why they lost that ride, so that's why they went their separate ways, and that's how we're going to bring them back together in this Days of Thunder sequel. I don't think in present day NASCAR that Pitt and Cruise's characters, Cole, Sonny Hayes, will be taken as seriously as Sonny Hayes' character was taken in F1. NASCAR is definitely, it seems like a more of a young man's sport versus F1 in a sense. I don't really know how true that is, but again, it's the movies. You can kind of do whatever. So, I mean, we could see them both jump into NASCAR again to be like, hey, we can still hang with these young guys. Or you could even maybe bring like a modified stock car. We had the IROC series back in the 90s and 2000s. You could bring that back in a form of, hey, here's this new car. It's, kind of a stock car, but it feels like an open wheel car. And we're going to go race it on 10 completely different tracks, some road courses, some street courses, some ovals. And it's like Brad Pitt's, Sonny Hayes, Cole Trickle can be like the face of this new sport. And they have no idea they're both being asked to bring it brought into the sport, so they get brought together. And the feud is reignited, and we just have a lot of fun 10 races between those two on different tracks, brand new car, just seeing how good these drivers actually are, because they obviously are the best or one of the best drivers in their respective movies. So I'm sure there are people that are smarter than me that can really flesh out a plot and storyline better than me, but I feel like those could be big connection points or big connection ideas to really connect the Days of Thunder world to the world of F1, get a sequel to Days of Thunder, and a pseudo sequel to F1, and just have a lot of fun with both Tom Cruise and Brad Pitt, because those actors really aren't slowing down anytime soon. So I really just want this F1 movie to bring us a really good NASCAR related movie. When I rewatched Days of Thunder again, I said a lot of this stuff doesn't translate very good on and off the track into today's society. So there's some things that'd be fun to kind of wipe out in that movie. And honestly, I've never been the biggest fan of Talladega Nights, because I felt like Talladega Nights made the NASCAR sport look very redneckish and somewhat of a laughingstock. So I feel like that would be nice to have a rebooted Days of Thunder to kind of replace both of those movies. Again, F1 was great. I highly encourage watching it. It's an A-, it's an 8 out of 10, 4 out of 5 stars, however you want to term it. Really well done movie, really enjoyed it, and I can't wait to get into some F1 in real life just to kind of observe, watch, and learn, and pick someone else besides Lewis Hamilton or Max Verstappen as my driver. So with that, appreciate you watching this video. I would love it if you gave the video a like. Please share this with your friends, your motorsports friends, and leave your comments of what you thought about the movie if you've watched it, or if you haven't watched it, go watch it, then come back, leave your comments. Leave your comments on a possible sequel or reboot of Days of Thunder. Do you have a different idea? I do know that Jeff Gordon has been rumored to wanting to be a part of something like that, so hopefully that gives more credence to doing that sequel. But that remains to be seen. So thanks again for watching this video. Hope you liked the review, and we will see you next time.